For those of you that are do-it-yourself inclined and you get a check engine light and you want to fix it yourself, well, one of the first things that most inexperienced people will do is they'll try to use a premium fuel or a fuel injector cleaner. Almost always, this is a complete waste of money. And you should also see my high-octane premium fuel video if you're curious about premium fuels, by the way, and what the difference is and if you need them. There are just hundreds of these codes, and unless the code is going to be something specific that only a premium fuel could fix, which very, very unlikely, or you have clogged injectors, which again on today's cars, not very common, pretty unlikely, you're almost always going to just waste your money. So what should you do? Well, if you are mechanically inclined, the first thing you need to do is determine, is your vehicle OBD1 or OBD2? And if your vehicle is pre-1996, it's going to be OBD1. And those are a problem. And I actually don't even deal with those because my scan tool that I use here to tap into computers only works on 1996 and later. But OBD1, what was going on back then is computers were just kind of first introduced into the automotive market, and every manufacturer had their own computer language. It's kind of like Windows versus Linux versus DOS versus MacOS, all these kind of languages. And automotive shops were going crazy because every computer has to have all these different diagnostic tools, and even different models within the manufacturer would have their own software. So a lot of them were, actually fairly simple. You could do different combinations of turning the keys on and off. You could jumper certain wires in a certain connector, and you can get the check engine light to flash a number of times, indicating the 2-digit code that I had mentioned earlier. Others were not quite so simple. So it was just a mess. But come 1996, the United States decided to standardize all this, and basically everything went Windows. So all cars in the United States from 1996 on, and some cars as early as 1995 and a half, they went to OBD2, Onboard Diagnostics is what OBD stands for. So OBD2 was a standardized system where all cars use the same software. And if you have an OBD2 car, the very least, where did it go? You need to fix those cars is a code reader. You will need some kind of code reader. It is, to my knowledge, I don't know of any cars where you can do a key on, key off pattern or things like that. You're going to need a code reader. So that's your first step, is your car OBD1, OBD2? If it's OBD1, probably best looking elsewhere because I don't mess with those. If it's OBD2, the very minimum you need is a diagnostic code reader. And it is going to have, regardless of whether it is an extremely simple one like this one, or a more complex one like I have tied with my laptop, or a professional one like a professional diagnostic technician would use, that could cost $5,000. They will all have a connector like that. It's called an ALDL. I believe it stands for Assembly Line Diagnostic Leak. And it will plug somewhere around the dashboard area, usually under the steering wheel, but it's going to be within 3 feet of the steering wheel. Sometimes they're kind of hidden in kinky locations. I think recently I was doing a Hyundai where it was behind an ashtray or something like that. But what you're looking for is a connector that looks like this. And when you tap into that connector, as long as the key is on, you at least have to have the key on. You don't have to have the engine running. And you get your code from the code reader. It's going to be a letter followed by 4 digits. And it can be a lot of them. This is a book of just some, not all, but just some of the codes. There are lots of them. Again, this isn't even all of the codes. But the point is, you're going to get a code. Now, to people who are inexperienced, they are going to look at these codes and they are going to see something that to them is going to look like blah, 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 oxygen sensor, blah, 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 blah. And they're going to think, oh, I need to change the oxygen sensor. The most important thing, if you take nothing else from this video, the most important thing to know about diagnostic trouble codes is they are not telling you what component to change. They cannot tell you you have a vacuum leak. They cannot tell you that you have a bad electrical connection. They just simply tell you that a circuit or a feedback mechanism is reporting something unusual. That's it. That's all they do. You have to do some type of diagnostic test. So when you see a component name in a code, do not go to the store, say, I need a idle air control valve. And then you get it, you open the box, and you look in the engine for the thing that looks like this, and you replace it. Almost always, you will be very disappointed with the result. So what you'll need to do is some type of diagnostic test, and you'll need either a service manual, or a lot of times you can find things online. Actually, I try in my videos to show how to diagnostically test these systems, often without a scan tool. But normally to diagnose these systems, it's really helpful to have some type of scan tool as opposed to a code reader. This is a code reader. This will tell you what the code is. A scan tool allows you to actually tap into those circuits and tap into those systems and solenoids. Sometimes even move them yourself to see if they work, and it will help you to diagnose. But it is not an easy thing to do, and it does take some skill. So that's something you need to be prepared for if you're going to try to fix your own check engine light problem. Now, once you do fix what you think is wrong with the check engine light, you will have to clear the code. And again, that can be done with any very basic, simple code reader. You will plug in and just erase the code, and it will clear the codes from memory, and you're back to new again, and the check engine light goes away. You can also often do it by disconnecting the battery for a good 15 to 30 minutes. This may make it occur to some people, well, hey, if I've got an emissions inspection due, why not just go to the AutoZone, have them clear my check engine light, and then I go get my emissions, and hey, I'm clear for 2 years or whatever. Well, it doesn't work that way. The technician will say, hey, we can't pass this car because it's been reset recently. It hasn't undergone enough drive cycles to realistically give a chance for a check engine light to set. So you'll have to drive around the car more and then come back and get retested. So don't try that. That's not going to work. You'll have to get it fixed for real, most likely.
And the final thing I want to say about the check engine lights is you really, really need to be careful about the advice that you get, I guess including mine, about fixing check engine lights. You're going to find a lot of stupid advice. People telling you, oh, you probably need to change an oxygen sensor. Oh, I had that happen to my car. It was a idle air control valve, whatever the hell that is. Remember all of these hundreds of codes that you just saw. The odds that the reason for your check engine light is going to be the same as somebody else in an automotive chat room is pretty infinitesimal. So the thing is that anybody that tells you that you need to replace a component as advice on how to fix your check engine light, they are an idiot. Do not do that. You have to follow some type of diagnostic process, some kind of procedure to isolate where the failed component is. You then have to test that component, and when you test that component and see that it is actually failing, that is when you need to replace a part. Remember, a lot of times it will not be the actual component. Usually it won't be. If it is an EGR valve, it can be a vacuum line between the EGR valve and the solenoid that is bad. It could be an electrical connection. It could be something totally unrelated. A lot of times you get what's called referenced codes. Oxygen sensors do this all the time. It's one of the reasons why the most often replaced thing for a check engine light is an oxygen sensor. There are so many things that can cause an unusual oxygen concentration in the engine, and the oxygen sensors report this. So there are probably more oxygen sensor codes than a lot of the other codes, and that's the reason why so many oxygen sensors get replaced unnecessarily. Usually it is not the oxygen sensor that is broken. It is referencing some other condition in the vehicle totally unrelated to the oxygen sensor. Always keep this in mind. Do not replace parts unless you actually isolate the system that is failing and then narrow down to the component that is failing and then test that component. If you do not do that, you should not be changing parts.
So there you have it. As promised, more than you ever wanted to know, certainly more than you needed to know, but pretty much everything I know about check engine lights. So hopefully that helped, and we'll see you next time.